I used to spend hours turning piles of compost. Week after week I'd haul kitchen scraps, layer in yard waste, water it down, then flip the pile to keep it aerated. It worked, sure, but it was exhausting. The truth is I almost dreaded the chore. And then one season I stumbled on a method so simple, so low effort, and so effective, that I stopped making traditional compost altogether. This lazy trick gave me the same rich, fertile soil, sometimes even better, without all the hauling, turning, and waiting. Today I'm going to show you what it is, how to do it step by step, and why you might never go back to traditional composting once you see the results. The problem with traditional composting is the work it demands. Let's be honest, the idea of composting sounds simple, but the reality is a lot more demanding. You've got to keep the carbon-to-nitrogen ratio balanced, chop material small, monitor moisture, and turn the pile regularly to keep it from going anaerobic. If you get it wrong, you end up with a smelly heap instead of black gold. For small gardens or busy gardeners, that's often more trouble than it's worth. And while I believe composting has its place, there's a shortcut that achieves the same outcome with a fraction of the effort. The lazy trick is trench composting directly in the garden. Instead of building piles, I started burying my scraps directly where I planned to grow. This method is called trench composting, and it's as straightforward as it sounds. You dig a shallow trench or hole in your garden bed, drop in kitchen scraps or garden waste, cover it with soil, and walk away. That's it. Nature takes over from there. Worms and soil microbes move in, breaking down the material in place, enriching the soil exactly where your plants need it. There's no hauling scraps across the yard, no turning piles, and no waiting months for compost to finish. Why this method works better for busy gardeners. When scraps decompose directly in the soil, nutrients don't get lost to leaching or evaporation the way they can in an exposed compost pile. Everything stays locked in the root zone, ready for your next crop. It's essentially an underground buffet for soil life. Worms are drawn to the buried material, multiplying in the process, and leaving behind nutrient-dense castings. You're not just fertilizing the soil, you're actively building a healthier soil ecosystem right where it matters most. And because everything happens below ground, you don't deal with the odors or pests that open compost piles sometimes attract. So, let's talk about how to trench compost effectively in your own beds. There are basically two main ways to approach trench composting. The first is the simple dig and drop method, where you just dig a hole between your plants, bury those kitchen scraps, and cover them up. The second way is a rotational trench system. In this method, you divide your garden bed into thirds. One section is planted, one section is where you bury your scraps, and one section is left to rest. You rotate each season so every area gets enriched over time. Both approaches really do work, and neither one requires the constant maintenance of a compost pile. The key thing is to bury your scraps deep enough, about 6 to 8 inches, so they decompose cleanly without attracting any pests. Now, what materials break down best when you're trench composting? Well, most of the same stuff you'd toss in a compost pile works beautifully here. Vegetable peels, fruit scraps, coffee grounds, and shredded leaves all decompose quickly in the soil. Meat, dairy, and oily foods, though, should be avoided, because they break down slowly and can attract unwanted animals. The beauty of trench composting is honestly how forgiving it is. Even if you bury something a little tougher, like corn cobs or melon rinds, the soil life will eventually take care of it, and you don't have to micromanage the process. The results, honestly, speak for themselves in plant growth and soil health. After just one season of trench composting, I noticed a striking difference in my garden beds. The soil texture improved. It was darker, crumblier, and held moisture way better. Worm populations absolutely exploded, and the peppers, tomatoes, and leafy greens growing in those beds were noticeably more vigorous than in the beds where I'd relied on store-bought compost. By the second year, I'd stopped turning piles altogether, I realized that letting nature do the work underground was not only easier, but often more effective than traditional composting. So here are my final thoughts on why I'll never make compost again. If you love the science and ritual of building compost piles, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you want a simpler, more direct approach, trench composting is the lazy trick that really delivers. No piles to turn, no waiting, no hauling, just rich, living soil created right in your garden bed. Try it for one season and you might find yourself, like me, swearing off compost piles for good. If you found this guide valuable, go ahead and subscribe to Botanical Bliss and share it with other gardeners who are ready to work smarter, not harder. Together we can build healthier soil without breaking our backs.